In the Zagros Mountains of Iran, where modern roads rarely venture and electricity has never reached, something extraordinary is happening as the sun rises. A nomadic family is preparing for departure. Not departure to another town. They don't have a hometown. But departure to their summer pastures, a journey that will take weeks. They will travel through mountain passes, across valleys, through harsh weather, and they will carry with them only what the animals can bear. There are no refrigerators being loaded, no canned goods from supermarkets, no frozen foods, no food preservation technology beyond what humans discovered thousands of years ago. Yet this family will eat well. Their children will grow healthy. The elders will survive the journey. But how? How has this family survived for generations? In fact, how have entire populations of nomadic peoples survived for thousands of years, using food preservation knowledge that most modern people have completely forgotten? The Bakhtiari, Qashqai, Shah Savan, and other nomadic peoples of Iran have lived in these mountains for thousands of years. They are not primitive people living in deprivation. They are sophisticated survivors who have solved one of humanity's fundamental challenges. How do you feed a family when you cannot stay in one place? Twice each year, these families migrate. In spring, when snow melts and grass grows in high mountain valleys, they move upward with their herds. In autumn, when cold becomes dangerous, they descend to warmer lowlands. The route is always the same, passed down through generations. The timing is always determined by nature, by when water flows, when grass appears, when snow threatens.
Every item is precious because space is limited. Every food must be light enough to carry, durable enough to survive weeks of travel, and nourishing enough to sustain life in a landscape where hunting and foraging are unreliable. Food preservation isn't a hobby for these families. It's the difference between life and death. A failed harvest or spoiled food supplies can mean starvation during winter. A family that doesn't know how to preserve food won't survive 3 generations in these mountains. Yet this knowledge, which is literally survival knowledge, is being forgotten. Young people move to cities. Schools teach modern subjects, but not traditional preservation. Factories produce foods that last weeks in refrigerators, making traditional preservation seem obsolete. In 50 years, the knowledge accumulated over thousands of years might disappear entirely.
This is the story of 10 preservation skills that allowed nomadic families to thrive where modern people would struggle. These aren't ancient history. They're being used right now, today, by families in the Zagros Mountains. And they might be more valuable to modern civilization than we realize. The first preservation skill, and perhaps the most important, is the transformation of fresh milk into kashk, which is dried yogurt that can last for a year or more without any form of refrigeration. Fermentation begins. Within hours, the milk will thicken slightly as lactobacillus bacteria consume the lactose and produce lactic acid. This process happens without electricity, without controlled temperature, without any intervention beyond observation and patience. When the yogurt reaches perfect tanginess, a decision made not by thermometer but by taste and experience, it's spread thin on clean cloth and placed in the sun.
For 5 to 7 days, the sun does the work of modern dehydrators. Water evaporates. The yogurt, which began as liquid, becomes something approaching leather in consistency. Still flexible, but solid. Light in weight, concentrated in nutrition. The transformation is remarkable. 1 liter of yogurt becomes approximately 100 grams of kashk. all the nutrition is preserved and concentrated. The protein, the probiotics, the calcium, all of it survives the drying process. A family might produce 50 or even 100 kilograms of kash during the spring and early summer milking season. That's the preservation of over 1,000 liters of yogurt, made from the milk of their own animals, requiring no external input beyond sun and cloth and knowledge. During travel, kash is dissolved in water to create a simple but nutritious food. It can be mixed with herbs, combined with grains, eaten with bread. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't require refrigeration. A cloth sack of kash can sustain a family member for weeks.
The second skill is cheese making, paneer, a process that transforms fresh milk into something that lasts for months or even years. But nomadic cheese is not the aged cheese you might know from stores. It's simpler, made for practicality rather than complex flavor development. Rennet, an enzyme that causes milk to separate into curds and whey, is either purchased at market or made traditionally from the dried lining of a young animal's stomach. The Amish use this same technique, as do people in Switzerland and Italy. It's ancient knowledge, not unique to nomads, but essential to their survival. Once the whey is drained, the curds are pressed in cloth to remove remaining moisture. The resulting cheese is fresh, soft, creamy, but it won't last long in warm weather unless something is done to preserve it. Fresh cheese is preserved in two main ways. Some cheese is salt-cured, coated heavily in salt, which draws out remaining moisture and prevents bacterial growth. Other cheese is stored in cold water, mountain streams that stay cold year-round due to elevation and constant flow.
The cold water method works because the constant flow prevents stagnation, and the low temperature slows bacterial growth while hardening and aging the cheese slightly. The salt-cured method works because salt is antimicrobial. Bacteria cannot grow in its presence. A nomadic family making cheese has to make decisions quickly. This cheese will be in the stream. That cheese will be salt-cured. This third batch will be eaten fresh. These decisions aren't arbitrary. They're based on how long the family will be in this location, what their destination will be, how much space they have for storage. This knowledge, how much salt, for how long, when it's ready, is learned through doing, not through measurement. The grandmother knows. The granddaughter learns by watching, by doing under supervision, by making mistakes and correcting them, until the knowledge becomes instinct.
The third preservation skill transforms butter into ghee, clarified butter. In a landscape with limited vegetation and cold that burns calories, ghee is pure survival food. It's concentrated calories, and it lasts indefinitely without refrigeration. As butter melts, the water content evaporates and the milk solids separate. This separation is the whole point. Pure butter fat, ghee, is stable at room temperature for months or years. Butter, with its milk solids and water, spoils relatively quickly in warm climates. Ghee doesn't. The milk solids left behind aren't waste. They're fed to children or animals or stored separately for other uses. Nomadic peoples waste nothing. Everything serves a purpose. A family might produce 50 liters of ghee during spring and early summer milking season. That's a year's worth of cooking fat, fat for light, fat for healing skin injuries, fat for preserving other foods. Ghee isn't just calories, it's flavor. It's what transforms simple foods, rice, bread, beans, into something that feels celebratory rather than merely sustaining. In a nomadic diet of preserved foods, ghee creates the difference between mere survival and actual pleasure in eating.
A nomadic boy raised in these mountains learns to understand ghee through his senses, by smell, by sound, by watching the color change. He learns that the best ghee
comes from milk produced when animals are eating good grass, which only happens at certain times of year. He learns the connection between landscape, animal health, milk quality, and the quality of ghee his family will eat for the next year. The fourth preservation skill is the drying of fruits, a process that concentrates nutrition and creates something that lasts from summer harvest through the following year's growing season. In the mountains, fruit appears for perhaps 6 to 8 weeks. Apricots, mulberries, pomegranates, dates in lower elevations, figs in certain areas. This brief window of abundance must provide nutrients and pleasure for the entire year ahead. Unlike kashk, which is purposefully protected and monitored, dried fruit is exposed to heat and sun for days. The transformation is dramatic. An apricot that weighs 100 grams fresh becomes perhaps 15 grams dried. The water is gone, but the nutrition is preserved. The interesting thing about dried apricots is that the sun doesn't just remove water, it also changes the chemistry. Sugars concentrate, flavors intensify. The dried apricot tastes more like pure apricot than the fresh fruit in some ways. It's essence of apricot. Different fruits require different treatment. Apricots need several days. Mulberries, being smaller, dry faster. Dates from the warmer valleys are naturally drier and require less processing. A nomadic family knows all of this instinctively. Which fruits to pick when, which need how long in the sun, when they're ready for storage. A family might dry 50 or 60 kilograms of apricots during the summer. That's enough apricots to be eaten through the entire year. A source of vitamin A, sugars for energy, and a reminder of summer's abundance during winter's austerity. Dried fruit serves a dual purpose. It's nutrition, obviously, but it's also morale. In a diet of bread, cheese, and preserved meat, dried apricots become something.
The fifth preservation skill is perhaps less about food and more about health. The drying of herbs and medicinal plants that allow families to treat illness, prevent disease, and add flavor to simple foods. In a culture without doctors, without hospitals, without access to modern medicine, plants are medicine. A nomadic healer, usually an older woman, knows dozens of plants, their uses, their preparation methods, their contraindications. Mint aids digestion, crucial in a diet heavy on preserved foods and grains. Thyme is antimicrobial and soothes coughs. Oregano has similar properties. Sage is used for sore throats. These aren't folk remedies exactly. Modern science validates that these plants do possess the medicinal properties nomads have known about for millennia. Herbal teas are the primary medicine. When someone has a fever, mint tea is made. When someone has a cough, thyme tea. When digestion is troubled, a mixture of herbs is prepared. These treatments often work, or at least make the person feel better, which has value regardless of the mechanism.
This knowledge is transmitted through apprenticeship. The grandmother teaches whoever is available to learn. Daughters, granddaughters, nieces, even young men occasionally. The knowledge is precious and practical, and could mean the difference between recovering from illness and succumbing to it. Some herbs are gathered once a year at a specific time, when they're most potent. Some are gathered from different locations, requiring travel to specific places. This knowledge of where to find plants, when to gather them, how to dry them properly, and how to use them is perhaps the nomad's most valuable treasure. You can lose animals to disease. You can have crop failures. But if you have knowledge of herbs, you can always maintain health. The sixth preservation skill is the storage of grains and flour, foods that can last for years if stored properly,
providing long-term security and the caloric foundation of nomadic diet. Flour and grain don't spoil the way fresh foods do. A sealed container of flour can last months or even years. Whole grains last even longer. The challenge isn't spoilage so much as insects and moisture. Nomads have learned through experience that certain dried herbs prevent insect infestations without using any chemical pesticides. Bay leaves are particularly effective. Simply by layering these herbs throughout stored flour, infestations are prevented. This is ancient knowledge of natural pest control. Rice, when purchased at markets, becomes a staple that lasts months. A family purchasing 20 kilograms of rice knows this will provide a base for meals throughout months of travel and settlement. The transformation is remarkable. Grain, an ancient staple crop passed down through human civilization for 10,000 years, maintains its ability to nourish. A handful of flour can sustain a human being. A family storing 100 kilograms of flour has something approaching security.
This knowledge, how to store grain properly, how to recognize good flour from flour that's beginning to spoil, how much flour a family needs for what duration, is practical knowledge that has to be taught and learned. The seventh preservation skill is the making of dried bread. Bread engineered to last weeks or months, serving as traveling food when fresh bread isn't possible. Nomadic dried breads, sometimes called hardtack or fry bread, contain minimal water. This makes them rock hard when dry, but they're designed to be softened in liquid before eating or toasted over fire before consumption. During migration, when there's no time to make fresh bread daily, dried bread becomes essential. It can last for weeks without spoiling if kept dry. It can be rehydrated in hot water to make something almost like fresh bread. It can be crumbled and added to soups. It can be eaten hard as a traveling snack. The advantage of dried bread is its weight and stability. A kilogram of dried bread provides as much nutrition as 2 kilograms of soft bread, but takes up less space and doesn't spoil in warm weather. The contrast between dried and fresh bread illustrates a nomadic philosophy. Fresh, soft bread is a luxury, made when time and conditions allow, consumed immediately in celebration. Dried bread is security, made for survival, stored for long-term consumption. A nomadic family values both. The eighth preservation skill is the gathering and storage of nuts and seeds, foods that nature has essentially already preserved, protected by hard shells that keep the edible contents fresh for months and months. Walnuts are remarkable. The protective shell keeps the meat inside fresh for an entire year, even longer if kept in cool conditions. A nomadic family gathering 50 kilograms of walnuts is essentially gathering a year's supply of nutrition, healthy fats, protein, minerals. Different regions produce different nuts, but the principle is the same. The nuts are gathered, dried if necessary, then stored in their shells. When needed, they're cracked and eaten. Nuts serve a dual purpose. They're food, important nutrition during months when fresh food is unavailable. They're also trade goods. A family with 50 kilograms of high-quality walnuts has something of value that can be exchanged for items they can't produce themselves. The ninth preservation skill is the use of natural cooling, taking advantage of the Earth's stable temperature to preserve foods without any mechanical refrigeration. Below a certain depth, usually 6 to 8 feet, the Earth maintains a constant temperature year-round. In summer, when the surface bakes in heat that would spoil food quickly, the underground stays cool.
In winter, it stays warmer than the frigid surface. This stability is perfect for food storage. Some nomadic families build these cellars near their winter camps, taking advantage of the stability to store foods for months. Other families use natural caves or rock formations for the same purpose. A family with access to running water, a spring or stream that flows year-round, might construct a simple channel that brings this cold water through their storage area. The water stays cold, and the food stored near it remain cool and fresh for weeks or months.
This natural cooling technology requires no electricity, no mechanical parts, no mechanical maintenance beyond basic preservation. A properly constructed storage cellar will function for decades, centuries even, with no input beyond the physical reality that Earth insulates and water cools. The 10th and final preservation skill is salt curing. Salting or salt-free, the use of salt to preserve meat and other foods by creating an environment where bacteria cannot survive. Salt is precious in nomadic life. It must be obtained through trade or found in salt deposits, but its preservative power makes it worth any cost. Meat completely surrounded by salt will last for months or even years without spoiling. Before consuming salt-cured foods, they must be rinsed to remove excess salt, but the storage value is extraordinary. A family that slaughters an animal in autumn can preserve its meat through winter, assured of protein when no fresh meat is available.
Salt curing is ancient technology used throughout the world before mechanical refrigeration existed, but it's still actively used by nomadic families, requiring nothing but salt and knowledge. What can modern society learn from these 10 preservation skills that have allowed nomadic families to thrive in harsh environments for thousands of years? In developed nations, we waste approximately 1/3 of the food we produce. We buy food in supermarkets, bring it home, and throw it away when we forget about it or when its refrigerated life ends. This is profoundly wasteful of resources. The water used to grow the food, the energy to refrigerate and transport it, the land that produced it. Nomadic families waste almost nothing. Food is preserved deliberately and used consciously. When kashk is made, it's made with intention. Each piece represents milk from animals that required care, resources that were limited. When dried fruits are stored, they're counted carefully. This many for eating, this many for trade, this many as emergency reserves.
We've lost something by moving to industrial food systems. We've lost the knowledge of how food actually works, how it can be preserved, how it can be made to last. We've lost the connection between the effort of production and the act of consumption. There's a growing movement of people returning to these skills. People are making their own cheese, growing food, drying fruits, preserving foods traditionally. They're finding it satisfying, educational, and increasingly practical as they become more food secure and less dependent on global supply chains. The nomadic skills we've explored aren't museum pieces. They're not relics of a primitive past. They're sophisticated solutions to fundamental human needs, and they might be increasingly relevant in a future where energy costs rise, where supply chains are fragile, where knowing how to preserve food yourself becomes valuable. Could these forgotten skills become valuable again in the future? If energy becomes expensive, if supply chains break down, if we face disruptions we haven't anticipated, the knowledge to preserve food without electricity, without factories, without global trade networks might become essential.
The Iranian nomads haven't preserved these skills because they're quaint or nostalgic. They've preserved them because they work.
They've kept this knowledge alive because it's proven itself over thousands of years through countless hardships and challenges. In the face of a future that's uncertain, there's something reassuring about knowing these skills exist. Knowing that humans have solved the problem of feeding themselves without modern technology. Knowing that the knowledge to do so is not secret or impossible. It's just been temporarily set aside by people fortunate enough to have modern convenience. If this glimpse into nomadic food preservation has interested you, taught you something new, or made you reflect on our relationship with food and technology, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about traditional cultures, ancient wisdom, and the remarkable ways humans solve fundamental challenges. What surprised you most about these preservation methods? Could you imagine adopting any of these skills in your own life? Comment below. We'd love to hear from you and learn about the food preservation traditions in your own family and culture. Sometimes, in our rush toward the future, we forget that our ancestors solved problems we still face today. Sometimes the oldest knowledge is the wisest. The nomads of Iran remind us that self-sufficiency, resourcefulness, and respect for food are timeless values. In learning their preservation,